So I love Madness of Crowds, and I'm hoping that you can talk a little bit about what that madness is. What is the madness of crowds? What does that mean to you?
I think the primary madness going through our societies at the moment is caused by people who are fundamentally misrepresenting the nature of our societies. They claim that America is a patriarchal, cis heteronormative, racist society, and that everything in the American past needs to be assailed in order to have any kind of American future. And I think this is not just a fundamentally misguided interpretation of history, but it's an unfair judgment of America today. The madness is created, apart from everything else, by people believing that justice, equality, and equity can be attained by doubling down and focusing for the rest of our lives on people's immutable character traits. That is, instead of getting past issues like race, sex, sexuality, instead of making these things rather boring, passé, as uninteresting as talking about hair color, that in fact what we should be doing for the future of all of our lives is to obsessively talk and focus on race, sexuality, sex, gender, and that we should judge people accordingly. The madness centers around the fact that in half a century, since Martin Luther King gave us perhaps the great moral insight of the late 20th century, the idea, the aspiration, the dream that we should see people and judge people by the content of their character, not by the color of their skins. Half a century after that, we find ourselves, unbelievably, amazingly, talking obsessively about people's skin color, obsessively about their sex, obsessively about their sexual orientation. And this is being driven by people who believe they are doing this and acting in this way in order to make us all freer. And they're not. They're tying everyone down. They're tying us up. They're holding everybody back.
When you say people are obsessively focusing on these immutable characteristics, some people would push back and say, well, we need to do that for the remaining biases that people have, and so we need, in order to overcome this problem, we do need to talk about these things. What do you say to that?
Well, we need to talk about them. We don't have to obsess about them, and we don't have to weaponize them. Unfortunately, a large number of people, believing they're acting in the name of justice, including social justice, seem to think that you can play groups of people against other groups in order to win. So, for instance, they claim, they actually speak and act as though the way to solve any remaining issues of racial injustice is to defame and insult all white people. These are people who seem to believe that if there are remaining ceilings preventing women from getting to certain positions in society, a claim which I don't think is, in fact, accurate, that in order to get through any ceilings they see as still being there, they should insult and speak in a derogatory manner about all men. As if this society does have any remaining problems about homosexuality, they should get through that by insulting all heterosexuals. This isn't a solution for justice. It's a solution for endless ongoing division. And I think some of the people doing this know what they're doing, and they're deliberately being divisive. And others are simply misguided. They actually think that if you insult one group of people enough, you will get some kind of justice at the end of it. I think it's actually the opposite. I think you exacerbate any residual tensions that exist, and you create a whole heap of new ones.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally agree. So for those who don't understand what the word woke means, could you give a brief summary of what you think that word means and how it manifests in our society?
The term woke was first of all used in a kind of praising light. Not very many years ago, people would boast about being woke. Then it started to be sniggered at, laughed at a bit. And it became something people used about other people, not in a very brave light. She's so woke. It was a little bit of a joke. And when that turned around, the people who'd originally used it pretended that the word had never been used by them. And in a way, this is a very typical move. So that you pretend that words don't exist, concepts don't exist, and you fix them all to try to suit your own short-term gain. The term woke, as it's come to be understood, is a pretty useful, slightly light-hearted description of the sort of person who believes that their mission in life is to correct the behavior and thought mechanisms of every other human being on planet Earth. You might say it's presumptuous in its own way. And these are people who, for instance, think that purpose and meaning in life, their objective in life, could be found by campaigning for social justice. And they always mean the same set of things. They mean for racial justice, justice for LGBTQ people, justice for women. All of it, by the way, is a vindication of something that Eric Hoffer famously said 70 years ago, which is every good cause begins as a good cause, becomes a business, and degenerates into a racket. I think woke ideology is already at the racket stage of that. But a lot of people who think of themselves as woke, or who are thought of as woke, believe that they are doing, as it were, the Lord's work. They think that they are acting in a cosmic fight, at the end of which we will arrive at equality and indeed equity on this earth. And here's the problem, by the way, which is that, as I stress, it starts from some good intentions. Historically, who could deny that there has been racism in every society, including this one? Historically, who could deny that women have, in this society, as in every other society on earth, at times historically been held back from things they should have been able to achieve? Who can deny that homosexuality, that gay people, were prejudiced against until really fairly recently? We have, in the last half a century or so, gained a whole set of rights advances, all of which I think we should all be incredibly proud of. But the woke mind believes that that struggle is not just not over, but the struggle has never been more serious, never been worse. The woke fraternity present America as if it is an exceptionally racist society today, as opposed to a society in which those racists who do exist are pushed completely to the margins and have no position in public life at all. They present the situation as if it's never been worse for gays, that we're at the situation that people were in 1968 at the Stonewall Inn. They present it as if women are so completely prejudiced against in our society that we basically all live in a Margaret Atwood novel. None of this is a fair estimation of this society. It's all a very fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of the society we're in.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think people exaggerate this to such a degree? I mean, I know you've lamented the decline of traditional religion to some degree in the past, and I can understand that. And my suspicion is that is part of the reason people are latching onto this. But what do you think? Do you think this is a replacement for traditional religion?
Well, you may lose God from your society, and as a non-believer, I have very mixed views about that. But just because you've lost God from your society doesn't mean you don't have God-shaped holes. A massive God-shaped hole in our society is what the hell people are meant to be doing with their time here on Earth. That's not a small question. The woke answer it with a pretty good answer of their own, which is that life can be most meaningfully lived by fighting for justice. The problem they have is that they find themselves fighting with more vitriol and exuberance than at any stage before, at a time when things have never been better. And in fact, counterintuitively, they don't actually want the situation to be better. And the reason is this. In a post-religious society, among much else, people still want to be thought of well by their peer group. Various times in the past, you might be thought well of by going to church on Sunday, wearing the right clothes, looking smart on that occasion, singing the hymns loudly, living a proper life and being regarded as good and virtuous and much more. And today, the woke have got their own answer to this, to live a good life, to be thought of in a good manner by your peers. You must be seen to be involved in the great struggle of the era. If you shrug and say, well, I'm not much interested in that, you would be a heartless person who's not on board with the important struggles of your time. And so large numbers of people are trying to prove to their peer groups that they are good, that they're virtuous, that they go on marches, that they say the right things, that they chant the right slogans, that they hang the right signs in their window, that they have the right bumper sticker, that they've proved their credentials, and much, much more. And in that way, they think that their peers will look at them as good, as virtuous. There are lots of problems with this. One of them is the one which I describe as the problem of St. George in retirement. My analogy is that St. George, after slaying the dragon, finds himself having accrued a considerable amount of what we might call social capital. And people admire St. George for his dragon-slaying abilities. After that, St. George may find himself wishing to slay more dragons in order to continue the wide public acclaim he's been enjoying. And if there aren't any more dragons in the land, he'll have to find something to swing his sword at, and can find himself perhaps swinging his sword at ever smaller creatures, until eventually one day we might find St. George staggering around the land, swinging his sword at thin air. Now, some people say, well, we're not in a situation, unfortunately, that we're swinging at thin air. But I would say that social justice activists, the wokerati and more, are desperately trying to find any remaining dragon-like creatures in the land. And there's a reason for that. And again, it starts in a good place, because who would not have wanted to have marched with Martin Luther King in the March on Washington? You know, who would not have wanted to have been at the Stonewall Inn in 1968? Who would not have marched with the suffragettes if they'd have had the chance? Those people still alive, not from the last of those three, but from the first of those two, who were there at these historic occasions, did indeed accrue social capital and the respect of their peers. And it was justified. These things required bravery, struggle, and they were on the right side. Now, today, we don't have a situation such as we had in the 1960s in America. It's not the case that homosexuality is illegal. It's not the case that there are any laws in this country that prejudice against black people. And it isn't the case that you can institutionally prejudice against women. But there are a lot of people who would like the social capital that accrued to a previous generation. And they find themselves in a surprising position, perhaps, of needing the situation to be worse than it is. And that's the explanation for why so many people keep presenting the situation in America today as if it's never been worse, at the precise moment in history when it's never been better. When you say never been better, some people think you mean, oh, absolutely everything's sorted out, is it? I don't say that. But I say it's very obvious, provable, by any fair estimation, that the situation in America today on every rights issue is nothing like the situation it was in the 1950s and 60s. We've come a long way very fast, and people should be very proud of it. But there are people, as I say, who believe that they need to keep struggling. They find meaning in the struggle. They find a purpose in the struggle. They find a life justification in the struggle. And for that struggle to really be engaged in, they need to pretend that our society is institutionally racist, institutionally homophobic, institutionally sexist, misogynistic, patriarchal, and that therefore we have to fight as previous generations did, I think is a wild misunderstanding of the current situation. And what the people who are doing it, among other things, seem not to be able to contend with is the fact that what they are likely to do, if they are able to do anything, is simply to hurtle everybody back into a discussion we should have been able to have left behind by now, which is so damn uninteresting, which is the discussion about people's sexuality, sex, and racial characteristics. So in other words, in the name of progress, the woke activists seem able to do nothing so much as to make everyone in our society regress.
Yeah, so on the issue of meaning, I think you're spot on there, and that's something that's really important to me in my life. I used to be a fundamentalist Christian, and then I very slowly lost my faith, and I went through a really brutal period of very severe depression that culminated in nearly ending my life, and it took a lot to get over that. I had lost my foundation of morals, of beliefs. I had no direction. And it was incredibly challenging. It was really arduous to find a sense of meaning, which in large part is doing this, right? I'm making films, helping people think more thoroughly about their lives. But I'm wondering, in general, especially since we're both non-believers, what would you offer as a replacement for meaning? Like, if this woke stuff is causing so much trouble and causing us to regress, what would you offer these people who want meaning and who want to live a valuable life?
There are two important things to say about this. The first is the importance of identifying bad ideas and getting around them as fast as you can. And the reason why it's necessary to critique and I think dismantle the woke ideology is because of the profound damage it's already doing to our society, the division it's already causing in the name of unity, and the unhappiness it's creating in the name of creating equality. So that's the first thing, is bad ideas need to be cleared away, like bracken. And there is a certain amount of pleasure as well as a duty in performing this task. But you could clear all of the bracken away and still have the question of what the hell we're meant to be doing here. This question dominates a lot of my thought. Like the description you give of the loss of meaning after the loss of faith is common, albeit not always so severe, and it points to a very, very big question, which I think is a question which has allowed a lot of bad ideas to state in our societies. We may be the first people in human history to have absolutely no explanation of what we're meant to be doing on Earth. And ideas, like nature, abhor a vacuum. And anything that's religion-shaped can quite easily flood into that space. Again, we could spend our time just making sure that those things don't happen or they get out of the way as fast as possible. The problem is that a lot of people in a society like modern America, modern Western Europe, say, let's get that stuff out of the way and then don't bother saying what might be put in its place. There are a number of ways to answer that question. The first is this, which is not to be so certain that certainty has so much going for it. The religion has an enormous advantage. All totalistic thought systems have a remarkable advantage over non-totalistic thought systems. That's because every single question is meant to be able to be answered. So in religion, you can say, why did God give leukemia to some children? And the religious will say, because he wants to test us, give our ability to suffer a certain workout, or call the child back to himself because he wants his child so soon. A non-believer might well say that's terrible. But a believer can go along with that because that's the nature of belief in a totalistic system. Somehow we have to be able to train ourselves to cope with complexity, variety, ignorance, be humble about what we don't know about, but not fall into the chasm of nihilism. Many people, when they lose faith and find no system to completely replace it with, replace faith with a form of nihilism. And what you describe is a characteristic example of that. But we do have to reach for answers. Now, my own belief is that we have an awful lot of flares along our path to guide us. And that is everything that we have and have inherited, which give us an idea of what we might do with our lives, what purposes there might be, and what meaning there might be in it. Now, here's the thing. Either we are meaning-seeking beings, and there is no meaning, or we are meaning-seeking beings, and there is meaning. I intuitively favor the second of those things. I don't think that searching for meaning is simply something to do. I think it's something you can achieve. And I think you learn that from the history of thought, culture, music, much, much more. Because human beings are very unusual creatures. We aren't ants. We don't just look after our material comfort and build little hills. We are, as I think C.S. Lewis, the great religious figure, said in 1939, 1940, we are this extraordinary being who can make jokes on scaffolds. We perform mathematical experiments in beleaguered cities. We recite poetry at the walls of Quebec, comb our hair at the gates of Thermopylae. And this is not panache, it's our nature. We're unusual. And there's something in that.
Right. So reaching back through history and what others have discovered through philosophy and religion, etc. These are ways in which we can approach a sense of meaning, it sounds like.
Well, yes, because if somebody said, I have no idea what to do with my life, I would say to them, why don't you start from finding out what people have thought about in this area before? The guides we have aren't nothing. Not nothing to have Socrates. Not nothing to have Mozart or Beethoven. Not nothing to have Shakespeare. And I could go on from a very wide variety of traditions. It's not like we're the first people to have wondered what we're doing. And I have a certain lack of sympathy for people who say, I can't see what meaning there is and don't seem to have the damn curiosity and go and find out what everyone else in the human species thought before they were born. There are a lot of clues we've been left, a lot of ideas that have been given to us. And that's one of the reasons why the total nihilism of the movement that's going on at the moment is so revealing. The nihilism that's so revealing is not just people who don't know what to do with their lives and come up with terrible ideas for what to do with their lives. It's the fact that they're not just incurious, but so judgmental on everyone who went before them. If you regard the past, all your predecessors, all of everyone else's predecessors, as merely reprehensible, morally imperfect people who didn't have precisely the views we have in 2020, then no wonder that you're staggering around a beleaguered wasteland wondering what the hell you should do with your life, because you haven't listened to anyone, because you're so presumptuous that you think that all of the obvious answers would have been dropped on you like rain. And I have very little sympathy. I have sympathy, but not much tolerance, you might say, for people who say, I don't know what I'm doing here, and have simultaneously snuffed out every single flare along the path that might have guided them. That's why the war on history matters, because it's a fundamental mistake to rob yourself of the ability to understand how everybody before you were born ever thought.
Right. No, absolutely. Switching back to this movement, if I were a, let's say, 12-year-old child, what would be the 2 or 3 things that you would want to impart about this movement? What would be the most important 2 or 3 things that you would want them to understand?
To counter it?
To understand about it, like about what it is. And then we can move on to the countering, yeah.
Well, there's a lot of child indoctrination going on. They're getting them younger and younger. I saw an intersectionalist book for 5-year-olds the other day. It seems sad to me to waste childhood in such a way. Innocence, indeed, childhood happiness seems to me a thing worth preserving for as long as possible. But children are being taught today, that, first of all, the past was a terrible, terrible wasteland of people who did not support gay marriage always, and did not always have 2020's views on racial equality, and did not always have 2020's views on the rights of women. And they teach young people to judge the past and to scour through it and find people who didn't have precisely our views, and empathize only with people who are perceived victims in history, and never to try to empathize with everyone else who was just trying to get through in the same way everyone always has done. And the second thing that's taught to young people in this area is that the battle that they could engage in their life is wildly simple, and that it involves a battle between good people and bad people, and that the good people are really obvious, and that the bad people are equally obvious, and that the purpose of life must be the good people waging war against the bad people. Of course, by the way, this ignores the fact that human life has never been that easy, because we are not divided and never have been into the uniquely bad and the uniquely good, but are all a mysterious, strange, wonderful, terrible concoction of all of these things. And that one of the thrills as well as tragedies of life is discovering this about yourself and other people. But no, the woke ideologues tell people it's very straightforward, very simple. Today, as always, good versus evil, light versus darkness. And the third thing it says is, and here's how you can fight those battles. We now even hear of children being told that if their parents or grandparents do not agree with the views that they have been given, then they should distance themselves or condemn their parents and grandparents. And I think, by the way, that this is revealing of nothing so much as a cult. Any movement that says that people you love who do not entirely agree with the point of view that you are told to believe, that you should distance yourself from those people, that's a cult. It's a cult. Just as it would be if you're told to hand over all your cash and give it to some fraudulent bearded guru.
Well, and that happens, right? People, they put up their PayPal addresses and say, I'm thinking of a picture of the rather obese woman in the green jumpsuit. I don't know if you've seen that. And it says, well,
which one? There's a number.
All white people are racist. PayPal me. So it has that element, right?
Yeah, it's the one who said all white people are demons.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. All white people are demons. Give me your cash. It's the language, the rhetoric of hucksters through the ages.
Right. And that's exactly how I view Robin DiAngelo. I think of her as a televangelist, the kind that I used to witness on TV.
Yes. I was thrilled the other day in Portland to see that one of the pieces of graffiti on the courthouse said in huge letters, repent.
Wow.
What bigger sign could you have that we're dealing with a quasi-religious cult? Yes, Robin DiAngelo obviously is one of the great hucksters of the time. You've got to admire the form, like the Reverend Jerry Falwell. Robin DiAngelo is very good at picking the pockets of people she thinks of as her inferiors. And I'm sure that she's bought herself the life that she believes that she's owed. Sure.